I never thought much about Sundays until Callahan started bringing me leftovers. The first time it happened, I'd been living in my apartment for maybe 3 weeks. I was still eating off paper plates because I hadn't unpacked my kitchen boxes yet. Still sleeping on a mattress on the floor because building a bed frame felt like admitting this was permanent. The divorce papers had been final for 2 months, but I was still living like I might wake up tomorrow and find out it had all been a bad dream. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock, gentle, almost apologetic. When I opened the door, there he was, Callahan, my neighbor from across the hall. I'd seen him a few times in passing, exchanged those brief nods you give people you share a building with but don't really know. He was maybe 45, with salt and pepper hair that was mostly salt now, and these incredibly kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Lasagna. Thought you might want some. Lasagna. Thought you might want some. I must have looked confused because he laughed a little. I'm Callahan. I live right across from you. I always make too much on Sundays. Bad habit from when I used to cook for 2. I took the dish because I didn't know what else to do. It was still warm in my hands. I'm Marcus, I said. Thank you. You really didn't have to. I know, he said, already backing toward his door, but I did anyway. Just leave the dish outside your door when you're done. No rush. That lasagna was the best thing I'd eaten in months, maybe years. It tasted like someone gave a damn, which sounds stupid, but that's exactly what it tasted like. I ate it straight from the dish, sitting on my kitchen counter because I still didn't have a table, and I almost cried. Not because it was sad, because it was kind, and I'd forgotten what kindness felt like. The next Sunday, he knocked again. This time it was pot roast with carrots and potatoes. Made too much again, he said with that same gentle smile. Terrible at portion control. I knew he was lying. I knew he lived alone. I'd seen him coming and going, always by himself. No visitors, no dates, no roommate. But I took the food anyway because I was lonely and hungry, and the lie was kind enough that I could pretend to believe it. This became our routine. Every Sunday, like clockwork, Callahan would show up with something homemade. Chicken and dumplings, beef stew, shepherd's pie. Once he brought over this incredible Thai curry that he'd spent all day making, and when I told him it was amazing, he lit up like I'd given him the best compliment in the world. We started talking more, at first just at the door, those brief exchanges when he'd drop off the food. But then I started inviting him in, just for a minute, I'd say, just to say thank you properly. Those minutes turned into 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. We'd sit in my still mostly empty apartment, eating whatever he'd made, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. His job at the library, my work from home doing graphic design, the weird guy on the second floor who played tuba at midnight, how the building's elevator made that concerning grinding sound that probably meant we'd all die in there someday. He never asked about why I lived alone, never pried about the pale circle on my ring finger where my wedding band used to be, never pushed when I'd get quiet sometimes, lost in thoughts I didn't want to share. Callahan just existed beside me, this steady, comfortable presence that asked for nothing, except maybe my company for an hour on Sunday afternoons. I started looking forward to Sundays in a way I hadn't looked forward to anything in years. I'd catch myself on Saturday nights wondering what he'd make, what we'd talk about. I'd actually clean my apartment a little, not that he cared. I'd make sure I was showered and wearing something other than the sweatpants I'd been living in. Small things, but they felt significant. One Sunday in October, about 4 months after this whole thing started, Callahan showed up without food. He was holding a bottle of wine instead, and he looked nervous. Actually nervous. I'd never seen him nervous before. I didn't cook today, he said, and there was something vulnerable in his voice. I was wondering if maybe you'd want to come over to my place instead. I could cook for us there, make an actual meal, not just leftovers. My heart did this strange flutter thing. You've never actually made too much food, have you? He smiled, but it was different this time, softer, more honest. Not even once. His apartment was beautiful, warm and lived in, full of books and plants and photographs of places he'd traveled. He had an actual dining table with real chairs, and he'd set it with cloth napkins and proper dishes. There were candles. He'd lit candles. "This is really nice," I said, and I meant his home, but I also meant this, whatever this was happening between us. "I'm glad you came," Callahan said, and he was doing this thing with his hands, fidgeting with the wine bottle label. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to, if you'd understand what I was really asking." I knew what he was asking. I'd known for weeks, maybe months, maybe since the first time he showed up at my door with that lasagna. But knowing and acknowledging are different things, and I'd spent so long building walls around myself that I'd forgotten how to let anyone in. "I'm recently divorced," I said, because he deserved honesty. "From a woman. I was married for 8 years. "I know," Callahan said gently. "I saw you moving in, saw you were alone but wearing a wedding ring, saw you take it off a few weeks later and just stare at it. You noticed that?" "I notice everything about you, Marcus." He said it so simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I have since the day you moved in." I sat down at his table because my legs felt suddenly unsteady. "I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "I don't know who I am anymore. For 8 years, I was someone's husband. I played that role so well, I almost convinced myself it was real, but it wasn't." She knew it wasn't. We both knew. Toward the end. Callahan sat across from me. He reached across the table and just rested his hand there, palm up, an invitation. I stared at it for a long moment before slowly placing my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and solid and real. "You don't have to know who you are yet," he said. "You just have to know who you want to become." "I think," I said slowly, "I want to become someone who doesn't lie anymore, someone who doesn't hide." "That sounds like a good person to be." We sat there holding hands across his dining table, and it felt like the most honest moment of my entire life. More honest than my wedding day. More honest than any of the 1,000 small deceptions I'd told myself and everyone else for years. "Why Sundays?" I asked. "Why did you start bringing me food?" Callahan smiled, and there was something bittersweet in it. "I was in a relationship for 12 years. David, he died 3 years ago. Cancer. We used to cook together every Sunday. It was our thing. After he was gone, I kept cooking anyway because it was the only way I knew how to feel close to him. But I'd make all this food and have no one to share it with." "I'm sorry," I said, and the words felt inadequate. "Don't be. He had a good life. We had a good life together, and he'd be happy that I'm using those meals to take care of someone new." He squeezed my hand. "He'd like you. You have the same terrible taste in movies that he did." I laughed, surprised. "You've never seen me watch movies." "Your walls are thin. I can hear your TV sometimes. You watched Armageddon twice last month. It's a classic. It's objectively terrible, and I say that with love." He stood up, still holding my hand, and pulled me gently toward the kitchen. "Come on, help me cook. I'm making David's recipe for coq au vin, and it's complicated enough that I could use another set of hands." We cooked together, moving around his small kitchen in this surprisingly natural rhythm. He'd guide my hands when I didn't know what I was doing, his body close behind mine, his breath warm on my neck. It felt intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sex and everything to do with trust, with letting someone see you fumble and not being afraid of their judgment. The meal took 2 hours to prepare. We drank wine while we cooked, and we talked about everything. He told me about David, about how they'd met at a bookstore where David was doing a reading of his poetry, how Callahan had been too shy to approach him, so he'd just bought the book and left, how David had noticed and tracked him down a week later through the bookstore's customer list, which was wildly inappropriate but also incredibly romantic. I told him about my ex-wife, Sarah, how we'd met in college and she'd been my best friend first, how I'd loved her genuinely, just not in the way a husband should love a wife, how we'd both tried so hard to make it work, to force ourselves into shapes we weren't meant to be, how the divorce had been sad but also a relief, this mutual acknowledgement that we deserved better than a life built on pretending. "Do you talk to her still?" Callahan asked, stirring the pot. "Sometimes. She's actually dating someone new, a woman. Turns out we were both trying to fit into the wrong boxes." I laughed, but it wasn't bitter. We spent 8 years together and never once had an honest conversation about who we really were. "You're having one now," Callahan said softly. The coq au vin was incredible. We ate at his candlelit table, and somewhere between the first course and dessert, the conversation shifted, got deeper, more vulnerable. "I haven't been with anyone since David," Callahan admitted, "not because I don't want to, but because I'm scared. Scared of losing someone again, scared of how much it hurts when they're gone." "I haven't been with anyone since Sarah," I said, "not because I'm scared of losing them, but because I'm scared of finding them. Scared of what it means to finally be honest about who I am." "Who are you, Marcus?" I looked at him across the table, this man who'd been feeding me for months, who'd been patiently waiting for me to figure myself out, who'd seen me at my messiest and loneliest and hadn't turned away. "I'm someone who's attracted to kind men with salt and pepper hair, who make too much food on Sundays." Callahan's smile could have lit the whole city. "That's oddly specific." "I know exactly what I want," I said, "and I'd never meant anything more in my life." He stood up and walked around the table, offered me his hand again. I took it, and he pulled me up, pulled me close. We stood there in his dining room with the candles burning low and the dishes still on the table, and he cupped my face in both hands like I was something precious. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "I've never kissed a man before," I admitted. "I don't know if I'll be any good at it." "That's okay. I've kissed lots of men. I can teach you." So he did. Slow and gentle and patient, his lips soft against mine, his hands steady on my face. It felt nothing like kissing Sarah. It felt like coming home to a place I'd never been but had always belonged. When we finally pulled apart, I was shaking. "Was that okay?" he asked, and he looked worried, like maybe he'd pushed too far. "That was everything," I said. "Can we do it again?" We did. We kissed in his dining room until the candles burned out. Then we moved to his couch and kissed some more, learning each other, taking our time. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Just two people finally being honest about what they wanted. I didn't stay over that night. We both knew I wasn't ready for that yet, but when I left, he walked me to my door across the hall, and he kissed me goodnight like we were teenagers, sweet and chaste and full of promise. "Same time next Sunday?" he asked. "How about Tuesday too?" I suggested, "and maybe Thursday." His smile was radiant. "I'd like that." The Sundays continued, but they were different now. I'd go to his place or he'd come to mine. We'd cook together, eat together, talk for hours. We took it slow, held hands, kissed on the couch, gradually, carefully built something real between us. He met Sarah eventually. I'd been nervous about it, but they got along immediately. She hugged him and whispered, "Thank you for taking care of him," in his ear, and I saw his eyes get wet. Later, she pulled me aside and said, "I've never seen you this happy, not even on our wedding day." She was right. I'd never been this happy. Not because Callahan completed me or fixed me or any of that romantic nonsense, but because with him I could finally be myself, messy, confused, figuring it out as I go myself. And that was enough. I was enough. 6 months after that first Sunday, I woke up in Callahan's bed. We'd taken that step a few weeks earlier, and it had been terrifying and wonderful and nothing like I'd expected. Better, more real. He was still asleep beside me, his hair messy, his face peaceful. I watched him breathe and thought about all the Sundays that had led us here, all the meals, all the conversations, all the patient, gentle ways he'd helped me find myself. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Happy Sunday. Tell Callahan I want his lasagna recipe." I smiled and typed back. "He says you have to come over and learn it in person. No shortcuts." "Deal. You two are disgustingly cute, by the way." Callahan stirred beside me, opened those kind eyes. "Morning," he mumbled. "Morning," I said, and I kissed him because I could, because I wanted to, because this was my life now, honest and real and mine. "What do you want to do today?" he asked. "I don't know. Cook something, watch a terrible movie, exist with you." That sounds perfect. And it was. All of it. The slow Sundays, the patient kindness, the way love had found me when I'd finally stopped running from myself. I'd spent so long being someone I wasn't, trying to fit into a life that didn't match my shape. But here, in this quiet apartment, with this gentle man who'd fed me back to life one Sunday at a time, I'd finally found where I belonged. We got up eventually, made coffee, started planning what to cook for dinner, even though it was only 9 in the morning. Callahan put on music, some jazz record from his collection, and we danced in his kitchen while the coffee brewed. Not well. Just swaying together, my head on his shoulder, his arms around my waist. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For the leftovers, for being patient, for helping me find my way home." He kissed my temple. "There were never any leftovers, Marcus. Just a lonely man hoping his cute neighbor might be hungry for more than food." "I was starving," I admitted. "I just didn't know it yet. And now I'm full, happy, home." Outside, the city moved on with its Sunday morning chaos. But in here, in this small kitchen with this good man, everything was exactly as it should be. No more pretending, no more hiding. Just two people who'd found each other across a hallway, brought together by the simple act of sharing a meal. Sometimes love shows up at your door holding a casserole dish. Sometimes it waits patiently while you figure out who you are. Sometimes it's quiet and gentle and tastes like homemade lasagna. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it stays. Total_char_count 16,847.